Tonight we have Master Gardener Julie Reynolds-Grabbe, and she's here to teach us about sustainable gardening with Urbanite. And we have Master Gardener Louise Christie, who will be here in the background monitoring the chat. So if you have any questions during the program, feel free to type those into the chat to all panelists. Remember, anything you type to all panelists and attendees can be seen by everybody. And we'll do our best to get to all those questions. And then I also want to note that there is that handout for tonight's program. I'm posting the link in the chat one more time under attachments, and you can download that handout if you'd like to see it during the program. And with that, I will pass it over to Julie.
All righty. Thank you so much, Daniel. I really appreciate it. So this is my first Master Gardener talk I've ever given. I just want to start with that. And it's called Sustainable Gardening with Urbanite. So, oops, there we go. So how many of you have ever heard of Urbanite? I wonder if you've ever seen it being used in your neighborhood, or maybe you've seen it at a Master Gardener garden. A lot of people don't really even know what Urbanite is. So that the purpose of my talk is to really go into what it is, how it's helpful, how it fits into the Master Gardener, what's the right word, credo, so to speak. And so I'm more than happy to answer questions. Louise, thankfully, is on with me, and she will be kind of fielding those, and she'll interrupt me if there's like a really awesome question or something. And I'm more than happy to do that. So what is Urbanite? Well, Urbanite actually is just broken pieces of unwanted concrete that have been left over from a demolition project. So I'm pretty sure everybody here has driven down your street and seen a contractor's truck and seen a real similar vision to this, maybe not with the little girl and the sledgehammer, but something similar. You've seen piles of concrete, and you probably rolled your eyes and said, oh my gosh, when are they going to get rid of that? That's a total eyesore. Well, oops, sorry, let me get back. Urbanite is actually, in my view, part of a sustainable sort of credo. And the University of California Master Gardeners, which I'm a part of, we encourage environments that have sustainable gardening practices, reduce green waste, and encourage water conservation. And the elements of your garden that are at the very heart of sustainability are soil, compost, mulch, and water. I found that and I thought that's really straightforward. I think anybody can wrap their mind around that being sustainability: soil, compost, mulch, water. And by the way, these pictures, I'll get more into these pictures as we go on. I just put them on slides. They're pictures of my yard, my garden. They're pictures of inspiration that I found throughout researching how to do this project. So a natural building movement incorporates things that are natural, items that are local, and anything that's recycled, instead of high embodied energy, destructive, and ultimately unsustainable building materials or practices. So that's where this comes in. It also, this is kind of the crux of why I was interested in it as a Master Gardener, providing cover and protection for wildlife. I will tell you, previous to this project, I probably maybe saw 2 lizards a year in my yard. I see 2 lizards a minute in my yard right now. I mean, they love living in the Urbanite. They live behind it. They squirrel themselves in between it. And, I have tons of baby lizards all the time. They're so cute. And I don't think the birds really do much with it, but I know, ants and various other critters. I did see a possum once that was kind of looked like he was going to go hide in it. But, it's kind of a neat environment for landscape. It also creates a permeable hardscape, which lets rainwater, or any water for that case, go back into the soil and hopefully, fingers crossed, go back into the water table, which is really essential in our drought landscape here in California. And it keeps things out of landfills. That is huge for me. People that know me know that I like to recycle, I like to upcycle. I think about my children and I think, I want them to have a planet that's inhabitable. And so any little things I can do now, I hope will help. So that's a big one for me. The nice thing about Urbanite is it looks a lot like stone, and depending on the aggregate, and when I say aggregate, I have a little example here that I'll show you. Oh, you can't see me, can it? Can they see me? I can't remember. I think you guys can
Yes,
see me.
Julie, we can see
Okay,
you.
sorry, I forgot
That's
if you could
great.
or couldn't. So this is just a piece of concrete, and I brought this one to show you. Still got dirt on it. It's kind of gross. That's all over my keyboard. I wanted to show you the aggregate in it because I think it's actually very beautiful. And depending on when concrete was created, and in some cases, you know, I think this concrete may have been from the 50s or so when these houses were built. There's all these really cool like rocks and things. I couldn't find, there's at least a couple pieces in my yard that have this beautiful, almost jade-like green rock in it. And so over time, it also gets moss like growing on it. So a neighbor is often, many neighbors have walked by and said, hey, your wall reminds me of Ireland, especially in the rainy season, because it just gets covered with moss. So I actually find concrete chunks, I feel like a freak saying this, I find them beautiful. So anyway, there's an example of what the aggregate looks like. And the really cool thing is it can be planted with sedums, succulents, wildflowers, ground cover, moss, and it can just look gorgeous. And on the picture up here, this is not my yard. I wish mine looked this professional, but you know, it doesn't. You can see just how beautiful this is. And I think you'd be hard pressed driving by that going, thinking that's not like something they paid for. Just all of this hardscape was free to them. I'm almost positive because nobody pays for Urbanite. So anyway, that's that. It can be used for patios, walkways, flower beds, retaining walls, fire pits, virtually anything you can think of. It's free, it's readily available. Sometimes, you know, if you talk to maybe a contractor or something, they may be so excited that you want it that they'll help bring it to your house. They'll help move it to where you want it. And it's almost like free labor. It's really easy to work with, and people are absolutely fascinated by what you build because it's unlike anything else around. And I like this quote: while using Urbanite for a project requires extra human effort in, you know, lifting and driving it around or, you know, moving it into place, it does keep concrete waste from filling up our landfills. And it really doesn't require any production energy to do it other than maybe the gas in the car and food you eat, I guess, to give you energy to move it around. This is a picture of my living wall. This is after I first built it, and you can see things are just popping out of it. This was the first spring after I built the wall. And you can see there's some little succulents and things in the cracks. And I'll talk more about that. Okay, how to use it. Again, you can use it for patios, walkways, flower beds, fire pits. This picture right here is actually, I believe it's a keyhole garden, if I'm not mistaken. And you can see, I love this picture. This is actually a dry creek bed with a bridge. And I'll show you the bridge that I made at some point. It's in the next few slides, but that was a real good inspiration for me on what I could do with these concrete chunks. Also, you can make benches out of it if it's big enough, staircases, other structures. Literally anything you can think about and dream up, you can build it with free Urbanite.
Julie?
Yes.
Can I interrupt for a second? We
Yes.
had a question about whether there are sources from the county or any kind of broker or something that you can connect to get it.
You know what? I will be honest. I haven't taken it that far yet to like link up with the county and try and figure out. I mean, this was just like a personal journey. And what I will say is I'm planning to meet with somebody at the county for another reason soon. And I'll put this on my list of things I want to talk about because I would love it if the county would work with residents on how to repurpose these unwanted chunks of concrete to beautify all of our landscapes. So I love the question. Thank you. I wish
Oh,
I
I
had a
think-
better answer.
I think it was more like, are there any places in the county where you can put in a request for materials? Like we have places where you can get wood chips for free, like Arbor
Right.
mulch.
The
there
only place I can think of that I actually used like that, and it wasn't for concrete chunks, it was for sand. In the county, there are places you can get sandbags. So on occasion, I've used the sandbags for their intended purpose and then incorporated them into my yard. So I have a corporation yard right around the corner from me in West San Jose. So I don't know of any place. I've never heard of anything or come across anything like that. But I will tell you, I'm more than happy to push it and see if I can help get something going in that regard, because I think
Great.
it would be lovely.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. So what I like about Urbanite is it can look a lot like flagstone, and you can even stain it. Let's say you wanted it to be darker, you wanted it, kind of dark brown or something, you could actually stain it. And I understand there are some environmentally friendly stains available. I didn't stain anything. I used every piece that came to me in the way it came to me. I didn't change it in any way, but if you were really meticulous about how you wanted it to look, you certainly could stain it. That'd probably be kind of a big job, but you could. And another thing I love about Urbanite is you can use the space in between to fill it with sand, gravel, soil, in some cases even decorative rock, or these little, go to the dollar store and you get like marbles, or these little guys. You could even, if you were really trying to make a really funky, cool look, you could have the little glass beads in between. I actually had a neighbor that was getting rid of, when you have a fire pit and you have these little glass pieces that are different colors for your gas fire pit. She was getting rid of a bag of those, and they're dark green. And I used it in part of my yard, and it's absolutely beautiful. And I'll just mention this since I'm talking about these little beads and marbles and stuff. What's really cool, and I'll talk about a dry creek in a little while, is you can use these little beads and things to kind of mimic the look of water without water, which is neat in a dry creek. And so I typically, for the kids in the neighborhood along the wall, I have tons of these little glass beads and things, and they disappear. And maybe once a year, I go to the dollar store, buy some more, and sprinkle them around, because kids love that, little kids especially. And I don't mind that they disappear, because my thing is all about giving. I have a giving space here at my house. Okay, so let's move on. You can also, this is amazing, you can also plant ground cover or succulents in between all the pieces. And this picture right here is actually part of my corner wall that I built by hand. And it's massive. It goes all the way around the corner. This was early on, maybe the first year. And you can see this alyssum, I don't think I even planted that. It just started growing, and it actually overtook the entire thing, and it was beautiful. And then the poppies started coming up. And what's beautiful is it kind of softens the look of the concrete chunks over time. And I also have things that just kind of spring out, like there must be bulbs in the dirt or something, and the only way they can get out is to go between the cracks. And it's gorgeous. It's absolutely gorgeous. This picture is not mine. This is not my yard. I wish this was my yard. This is like my dream of what I could do with Urbanite. But you can see it's just really simple and really pretty. And I can tell you, you could probably build this, especially if you had help, in like a weekend. And here's another example. Here's some flower beds. And I love this because I love the curviness of how they did these flower beds. And then this picture here, this is actually part of my courtyard, which I've also created with all recycled materials. And I've planted dichondra here in the cracks, and I even have some baby's tears over here. And it, over time, especially when it's raining and it's moist, moss and these two guys kind of compete for the space between the cracks. And it's absolutely beautiful. Okay, where do you find it? Number one, this kind of goes to that question, where do you find it? Your neighbors, if you're like me, you know what's going on your street. You know who's doing construction. You know who's getting, pavers put in their driveway. You know who's taking out their back patio. go talk to those people and ask them, hey, what are you going to do with that? Can I have it? And see what can happen, because people may not realize this, but I realized this pretty quickly. People like us have to pay contractors to put chunks of concrete into those big bins that then get driven to the dump. And they're processed to some degree, but you know, a lot of them probably end up in a landfill. So if we can do something as mere citizens to stop that and make something beautiful and useful, why not? So yeah, I'm a little bit of a freak about Urbanite, I'll be honest. Yeah, people that know me know that I'm a freak. So anyway, other ways to get it is go on Craigslist. There's a version of Craigslist called Craigslist Free, and you'd be amazed what you can get. You can get soil, you can get gravel, you can get river rock, concrete chunks. Sometimes they even call it Urbanite. You can get all sorts of things. You can get bigger rocks, often for free. Usually you need a truck or something to get it. But people are amazing and they just want to get rid of it. And they're just so happy you want to take it. Also, Facebook Marketplace. Usually what I do if I'm looking there is I will just say free concrete. You know, I'll do search terms like that. Free Cycle is also a really good resource. That's more of an email sort of based Yahoo group thing. Nextdoor, the social network for your neighborhood, nextdoor.com. That's a great way to, you know, put out a call and say, hey, I'm looking for this, or search through the free section and see if anybody's getting rid of it. And probably the best way is if you see work being done, introduce yourself to that contractor, get their card, say, hey, I really like this material that you're going to be ending up throwing away. Do you think you can maybe help get it to my house? I did that many, many times. So and I'll talk about when I get to the bridge, I'll talk about how that all went down. But this is the way to get these pieces. It's really easy. And this is a little truth bomb. The stuff is literally everywhere once you actually notice it. And I'll use the example, you know, when you get like a red Volkswagen Bug, suddenly you're driving it and everywhere you go, you're like, oh, there's another one and there's another one. Same with Urbanite. You will find it, you'll be driving and you will see it everywhere. And you really can't unsee it once you know it's around. And, you know, there's a house around the corner that has some chunks right now. I don't need any, but every single time I drive by, I'm like, oh, I should maybe go get those. Yeah, it's a sickness, I must tell you. Okay, and now we'll talk a little bit about my specific story. This was a quote that I found doing my research and I absolutely loved it. And I'm just gonna read it. Most of the time I won't read the slide, but in this case I'm going to. Reusing old, broken up concrete to make the new walls. When I first ran the idea past a couple of designer friends, they were distinctly lukewarm. Instead of classy looking real sandstone? Not sure that will be a look you really want, said one. But I thought I could see something beautiful in my mind's eye. And that encapsulates exactly how I got into Urbanite, because I could see that something beautiful was possible. And so, my name is Julie Reynolds-Grabbe. I am a Santa Clara Master Gardener from West San Jose. I graduated in 2017 from the Master Gardener program, which I highly recommend. It's awesome. I have had a 20-year tech and operations career. I worked for Apple for many years. I worked for NASA for many years and also Stanford. The whole reason I embarked on this Urbanite journey was I wanted to remove my large, weed-infested, water-wasting lawn and build something that was living and something that would be a useful use, I guess, for my front yard space. And I wanted to do it basically for free because I had no budget to, you know, I didn't have $100,000 to redo my front yard. I had my bare hands and a brain and Pinterest, thankfully. And so Pinterest was my initial resource for how to do it and, you know, everything about it. But inevitably, it led me to the Master Gardener program because 3 years after I started this project, one of my neighbors, who's a Master Gardener, who had seen me building it for years, she said, you know, this is really cool. You should consider becoming a Master Gardener. and I did. So thank you, Dee. Why I love Urbanite. There are literally limitless shapes, sizes, textures, and every time I get another batch of concrete, like it's distinctly different from another batch. Sometimes there'll be aggregate on the top. Have you ever seen concrete like on a patio and it has little tiny stone pieces that are embedded that you can see on the top? Those make really pretty Urbanite wall chunks. So I love the limitless possibilities. I love that it's free. My first pieces came from seriously 4 different neighbors in my neighborhood that were removing concrete from various areas of their yard. Eventually, I expanded the scope to include pavers and bricks and rocks and gravel and all sorts of things. And most of it I got for free. I did have to buy some sand and gravel at some point along the way, but 98% of it was free. So I maybe spent maybe over time, maybe $800, maybe. And this is where my freakiness comes in. Pretty soon, like I got a little bit addicted to Urbanite, and I was frequenting Craigslist next door, Facebook Marketplace, trying to get my Urbanite fix. And there were actually many days where I had borrowed a truck from a friend, and I would literally cruise around my area looking for the piles of Urbanite in people's yards, and then go meet them and see if I could take it off their hands. So in this slide, you see this picture over here. This was the first picture of the use of Urbanite that I found on Pinterest, and I loved it. I loved the way this was planted, how it looked really natural. It's sort of a dry creek kind of look. I love that this was all drought tolerant, and then you can see the Urbanite kind of stacked here, but it's such a beautiful natural look, and I just fell in love. Oops, let me get back. Okay. During my 2-year project, I moved about 100 truckloads of Urbanite to my yard. I didn't do it all by myself. My kids helped on occasion. Occasionally, I could get my husband to help me. The people I took it from sometimes helped me. I had contractors help me. It was great. I calculated I spent about 3,500 hours on this project during that 2-year period, or maybe 3 years. And it's still not done. It's still a work in progress. It's not looking really great today, I'll be honest with you, because I need to go out there and do some work. But that's my plan after Christmas. So getting started. Okay, so this is a picture of my front yard. And you can see these are all the concrete chunks right here. This is sheet mulch. This is just pieces of cardboard. This is some pavers of some sort. And you can see distinctly these are pavers. So I sheet mulched the yard, and I learned how to do that also on Pinterest. And I did maybe 2 or 3 layers, because the important thing with sheet mulching is you don't want the sun to penetrate. So you overlay the cardboard over like this, boop. And then in some cases, I even put a third one. And the beauty of that is after maybe 6 months or so, that cardboard totally breaks down. And I think it's good for the environment. I don't think there's anything necessarily bad in there. Although I will tell you, if you end up digging this up at any point, which I've had to do a couple times, you will find pieces of tape, because tape doesn't really biodegrade very well. So, but that's okay. That's all that's left. And it's really good soil under there when the cardboard breaks down. And then I became friends with a tree guy, an arborist, who had a big truck and one of those mulcher things. And so frequently I would text him and say, hey, what do you say? Can you drop off some tree mulch for me? And so I'd have, a small car's worth of tree mulch out in front of my house, which I'm sure my neighbors loved. And then I would basically put it on top of the cardboard. So I had more than one layer of stuff going on. And my situation was, for this inner courtyard that you can see the picture of, I mean, it's massive. I have 10 tables out there now, and I could probably easily have a party with 100 people on this courtyard. So it's at least 2,000 square feet of courtyard. I mean, it's just, I don't even know how to do that, but I think it's about 2,000 square feet. So it's an amazing space to have people over, but I need to clean it up. Yeah, it's not looking so great right now. But this was at the very beginning, and you can see just the rubble and the piles. It was a lot. And then I gathered the free hardscape just as I went about my life, researched how to build it, and then I also am a composter, so I incorporated a ton of compost material as needed. And part of the thing is, and maybe I have a better picture that I could show you in a while, my yard slopes downward to the sidewalk, and the sidewalk, it sloped down, so the sidewalk and my yard were right here. Well, basically I built a 3-foot wall and I had to backfill everything. So that meant I had to find some soil or make soil, and I used whatever I could. And so there was a lot of paper, cardboard, green waste, scraps from the kitchen, you name it. I call it the lasagna method. There was a lot of lasagna method going on in the layers that I used to build up the soil. This particular slide it's an image that I found on Pinterest that was probably the most useful thing I found on Urbanite. And I broke it into smaller pieces so it's maybe visible for you. It talks about how to build benches, how to have a pathway, how to keep it level, what a bird's eye view looks like, how to build a spiral bed, a terrace, a raised bed, a sunken bed. I mean, it's really basic, but it was such a good primer on how to use Urbanite, and I loved it. And this next slide is the rest of it, which we got to talk about safety. Always do your research before you embark on a landscape project. And even more importantly, check with your local code authorities for what is and is not allowed, and if you need a permit. Here where I live, we can have up to a 3-foot wall, fence, something on the corner along the sidewalk. And let me just talk about this piece right here, because this is really important for safety too. When I built my wall, I knew nothing about how to build a wall with no mortar. I didn't even know, well, I never built a wall of anything, but there's something called batter, and it's really important when you're building something. And basically the first layer goes here, and the second layer goes a little bit back, and then the third layer. And this keeps it safe, so it's not gonna fall on somebody. And the other beauty of it is, let's say I built my wall too high and somebody came out and said, oh, that's too high. Well, it's so awesome because you basically just go, oh, really? Okay, let me just take this piece off. There's no mortar. There's nothing like holding it really tight together. So you can easily change it at a moment's notice. And I loved that about it. So this is about the mechanics of building it. And I'm not going to beleaguer that point. I mean, if you want to do this, like you could spend a lifetime researching this, but this was really helpful, and I wanted to share it. Okay. One other thing I found is it's super time consuming to make flat for the courtyard. And these are just images. This image here is kind of more like this part's kind of done. You can see I made kind of a sunburst and maybe a sun over here, and whatever. I just kind of go with the artsiness that I feel. This is kind of just laying it out to get a sense of what I have and what I need. But I will show you with my little thing. Like, this is a thin brick, right? And so if you're trying to make something even that's safe for people to walk on, maybe you can see the problem. And so typically Urbanite, which we've been talking about, this is just a small version, and it usually kind of has this flat side. The chunks are much bigger than this usually, but I use every size I get. Well, you can imagine if you're trying to put this and this in the same, you're going to have to do something. And so you either dig it out to put this in, or you build it up to put this in. And so that's something I figured out. Whoops, lost my mic. There we go. That's something I figured out right away. And that has kind of plagued me. That's been something that has been, I would say, a little bit of an annoyance, because if you had all the same kind of material, all bricks, all concrete chunks, it would be a lot easier, but incorporating different pieces, different sizes, it takes some time. But I mean, it's time well spent. I'll just
Really?
leave it there. Yes.
Could you elaborate a little bit on your techniques for doing this? Because somebody did ask, how do you make things level?
Well, so that's where, when I was talking about the cardboard and the sheet mulch, I mean, not the sheet mulch, the arbor mulch, that's where, and I don't really have a visual aid for that, but in the example that I was just giving, here's a good example. You know, you got this brick and this brick. What I would do for under here is I would just put a bunch, you know, you'd have your cardboard layer, and then I'd have some tree mulch. Well, I'd put extra tree mulch here. Well, one of the problems also is as it decomposes, this will lower a little bit, right? And so then I learned that, and I started incorporating maybe some rock material in here, some gravel, some sand, you know, something that wasn't really going to biodegrade. And then that way it would kind of keep level. You know, I can't say this is something I still struggle with. There are parts of my yard that are uneven, and I feel like it's kind of unsafe. And I will tell you, like, this is not a finished product right here. This piece is a finished product. This is not. But getting it to look like this, it does take some time. So I didn't realize how much time that would take. And there are pieces that I've completely ripped up and redone. And that's how I know all the cardboard has decomposed and the tree mulch. Hopefully that answers that question.
So it's more of a craft project with chunks of cement. And
yes,
you just keep going.
It's almost like a mosaic project. That's kind of what I think of when I have been doing this. And so I've incorporated a lot of different kind of materials that I don't think people would normally put in their yard. But you just make it work. And in my case, I was making it work with whatever I could find that would make it work. And over time, I learned more about what's a good thing. And so maybe tree mulch isn't the best idea. It's better to go with something inorganic like sand or gravel. But sometimes you have to buy that. So maybe it's not free. So, you know, you just work with what you have. I had a neighbor that had a bunch of kind of granite-y, kind of crushed granite, and she gave it all to me. And that was super helpful. So sometimes you just end up with something that works really well. And people can contact me afterward if they want, and I'm happy to talk to you, probably talk your ear off about Urbanite. So feel free to contact me. Okay. So this is what a hot mess of hardscape looks like. These are 3 different pictures of the courtyard area. And that's my son, Austin, when he was much smaller. You kind of get a sense of the scope of how big this area is, especially in this picture, because it goes way back over here and it goes way back over here. And I mean, at some point I was just drowning in material. This part right here, this was right before a party I had. And it was like the first party I had in this space. And I was really determined to make sure that it looked at least presentable. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't even, but it was good enough for a party. And that was in honor of a friend who had passed away. And so it was really important for me to have that kind of at that point. So yeah, it's a work in progress. One thing that I wanted to talk a little bit about, why I love my project, and yours could be totally different, is I love incorporating whimsy into my project. And what I mean by whimsy are spirals and starbursts and dragonflies and, you know, all sorts of fun little things. And I started it that way, but when I was building this, I had several friends that passed away, and I decided to honor them in the hardscape I was creating. And I'll just mention here, not all of this is concrete, obviously. Like that piece is concrete, that piece is concrete, that piece is that one. You know, a lot of these are bricks, a lot of these are pavers, a lot of these are just pieces of bricks. Some of these are, you know, just slivers of pavers. So whatever people had, I took and I used. Even this one, this is one of those cinder, I don't even know what it's called. It goes in your fireplace. So when you like break down a fireplace, there's these big, chunky, kind of orangish brick. This is a piece of one. It says San Jose on it. They're kind of orange. Anyway, I even used those, you know, like I wasn't picky. I would take whatever people gave me and use it. And so over time, I began to, I'm going to move ahead one slide. I began to start to honor people that had passed away. And in this picture, you can see this is the tree mulch. I'm just kind of laying things out, kind of getting a sense. I don't have a great picture of this. I apologize. This is actually a memorial bench to a very good friend of mine, Susan Marsland, who passed away from cancer. And I have every intent to go and mosaic this with beautiful colors. But until I'm at a point where I could do that, I kind of have done some mosaic for her here right in front of her bench. So this is her area. And I'm just going to point this out because it's kind of a good slide. This is what, when I refer to the internal flower beds, these are the flower beds that go around the courtyard itself. So you'll see these are kind of small walls and stuff. I have not planted any kind of living things in here. They're just kind of dry stacked right now. But they are beautiful in the rainy weather. They get kind of mossed over and they look really pretty. And the lizards love those even more. This particular one, I started building this maybe 2 years ago, and just out of brick pieces. And I had a very dear friend who lived in France named Florence Drillon, and she also passed away from cancer. So after visiting her in Paris before she passed away, I decided to memorialize her in this spiral. And I'll also point out, I also use these really big kind of mid-century modern concrete. They're huge. They're like that thick. I know you know what I'm talking about because you've seen them probably at people's houses. I have a ton of those and they look really pretty, and you can plant little plants in between. Just pointing that out. And this is dichondra here. And this is in the springtime, this is completely almost covered in dichondra. And then in the winter, it kind of, eases back. And sorry, I'm not used to having this mic on, so forgive me. Okay, some other unique uses in my yard. I used little tiny chunks of urbanite, and I'll show you an example. You know, like most people, most normal humans would, you know, see little pieces like this and be like, I'm just gonna throw that away. What am I gonna use that for? But I found some uses for little guys like this, because I built a dry creek bed here. And you can see there's little chunks, but you know, mostly it's these river rocks, which I also got for free. But it kind of just fills in the cracks a little bit. And then as I was describing earlier, this is a really good opportunity to use little glass beads and things and sprinkle them on the top to kind of give the illusion of water to the dry creek. I'll also point out this right here is a huge monolithic Stonehenge stone made of concrete that came out of a neighbor's yard that, you know, this big equipment basically had to move it into my yard. And they were thankful to get rid of it. And I was thankful to have it. But it took 8 men after that point to move it up onto to become like the bridge. And I have pictures of the final, but I just wanted to at least point that out. And another example, or just something I want to point out, is this is kind of where the internal courtyard starts. So this kind of is sunken down. And this is like looking at it from the sidewalk. So this was when I was just building it. So it's a little bare bones, not a lot growing there. I also used really large chunks to build 2 staircases. And these are pictures of them. You can see the huge pile of rubble that I had to just have somewhere at some point. I also built that memorial bench, which I don't have a great picture of, but I talked about earlier. I built this retaining wall that goes around our entire corner of our house. And I will say it looks a little funky when it's just doesn't have anything growing on it or in it. But once spring hits, it's just popping with color and so beautiful. Here's another, just a slide of a picture of the courtyard area. And, oh, sorry about that. I did use concrete to do the borders for the internal. I already talked about that. But one of my favorite things is I built a living wall. And so I'm on the succulents team with the Master Gardeners, and a lot of those folks are really good friends. And, you know, I would take like little pieces that they would throw away, and they're like, what are you doing with all that? And I'm like, I just can't explain it. You'd have to see my yard to understand. And so some of them are on this talk. So maybe this is the first time they're seeing this. Maybe they have a better understanding of why I'm such a scrounge, you know, when I'm working with them. But this makes it really beautiful year round. And I have had some challenges with it drying out. I do have to hand water this part. That's not my favorite, but I'm sure if you didn't bite off such a huge project, it'd probably be easier. And if you kind of had your watering figured out, you could make it really nice. But like, especially string of pearls looks so beautiful. And even there's like a version of a mini ice plant. I think it's this one here that has the purple flowers in here. It's gorgeous. And I love it when it looks like that. I also built a rain garden, and this is a picture of it. There's my sweatshirt. And you can see this is the bridge on its side, getting ready to be, you know, put as a bridge. So this is that whole dry creek. And the way I did it is I kind of sloped it downward to this rain garden. So when it rains, hopefully the water heads towards this rain garden and back into the water table versus out here on the street and into the sewer. So my goal was to retain as much water as I could. And there have been times when this has maybe been half full of water because it's rained so hard that it couldn't drain fast enough. But it's never flooded. I've never had any kind of problem like that. And what I love about my project is there was zero waste. Seriously, I didn't waste anything. If I didn't really need it, a lot of times I would just put it in the soil and backfill the wall with it. So there's quite a bit of area here that has some pieces and chunks and things. And, you know, I'm really proud of that, the zero waste piece. I also ended up creating borders for my backyard because I had extra concrete. And it's not totally evident, but these are so mossy green when it rains because this is kind of a shady part of the yard. And this goes all around the pool, and it's kind of a work in progress. It doesn't look that great, but I even did it there. Unfortunately, that particular part of my yard ended up costing me my gallbladder. I was moving so many concrete chunks. I think I strained myself to the point where my gallbladder got squished or something happened. So I ended up having to go to the emergency room and get my gallbladder out. That was super fun. But who needs that? I haven't missed it. So maybe it's worth it. So I'm almost done. These are some pictures of my kids, but they're the only pictures I have of what the yard kind of looked like before I started the project. And I'm so glad that the lawn is gone. But one thing I was talking about is this slopes downward, and you can see 3 feet up is about here. That is a metric ton of soil that had to be backfilled into this area. So I used anything I could to basically fill that in. And this is closer to the house, but you can see this is just a massive space, and it was so unused. I mean, it's not like my kids were out there playing or anything. So now at least I could have friends over, maybe after COVID. And then this is kind of some during, and you can see, you know, every single piece was put into place. And some of these chunks are heavy. I would say some are probably like 100 pounds each. So no wonder I lost my gallbladder. But man, I was really strong after I finished this project. And here you can see the bridge. It's not quite in place yet. And this is more of an after. And this is taken in spring. So you almost don't even see the wall in spring. It just is bursting with life. And that's exactly what I wanted. I wanted kind of to create this kind of intimate, cool courtyard that was kind of sunken down, but still have just beautiful landscape for like birds and lizards and, you know, whatnot. And just have people enjoy it. And they definitely do. And the number one thing I would say is my pro tip is embrace the imperfection of it. It's not going to look perfect. It's going to be imperfect. And just kind of getting over the perfection piece is huge. You will notice here, this is right by the driveway. This is where I used a lot of little pieces kind of to fill in right here. And this kind of orange stuff, I mean, I got kind of crafty at one point, and I figured those little pellets that they use, those wood pellets that you could buy at like Home Depot or something, when water hits that, it kind of turns into this weird kind of sawdust mush stuff. So at some point I bought a couple bags just to see would that help? Could that kind of, augment the soil and give some, something back to it, make it better. And so I was experimenting with that. And this entire project has been nothing but a trial and error kind of project. But it was so fun. And there's one other thing I had to tell you that happened because it's kind of interesting. There was some slides where I showed I had piles of things in the park strip. This is a pro tip too. Don't pile your stuff in the park strip between your sidewalk and the street. Technically, the city owns that. So I was cited. I didn't have to pay anything, but I was cited twice by the city of San Jose because a neighbor complained. They complained that I was building a circular driveway in my front yard. And that was not the case. But when the person came out, they noticed the piles and they said, yeah, you really can't do that. So I didn't get cited, nothing horrible happened, but I learned something. And so when I say, understand what your county or your city rules are about the park strip and the height and that sort of thing, like understand that so that maybe you don't get a letter from the city. And let's see what else. Okay. Oh, and this is kind of one of the only pictures that I have of kind of the finished bridge, but you really can't see the dry creek anymore. But it's kind of cool. It's kind of a cool element. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions that you may have. And Louise, feel free to help me out with those if there are any.
Well, if anybody has questions, go ahead and type them into the chat. I was wondering, Julie, if you could talk a little bit more about the plants and what plants did you intentionally put in and which ones just kind of self-seeded themselves?
So I'm going to use some pictures. These are just some extra pictures I have just to kind of remind me what I even have in there. This is a good series of pictures. So at some point, I think I had thrown some poppy seeds out there, and I don't know about you, but once you throw poppy seeds anywhere, you have poppies forever, which I love. I love them, and they're part of the Master Gardener logo, so that's super special. So mostly, if I come across any wildflower seeds, and maybe once a year or twice a year, I will throw wildflower seeds everywhere. And so you can see in here, and I'm so sorry, I don't know the names of everything. I apologize. These are some wildflowers. I'm sure there's people on here that are master gardeners that know the name of every plant, but I know alyssum and I know poppies. I also planted some, I think this is an agave, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of kind of larger, cool looking succulents. I have a lot of nasturtium, which I love, and that reseeds itself. So the poppies, the alyssum, the nasturtium, that just reseeds itself. I haven't had to do anything with that. I also have probably at least 1,000 spring bulbs planted throughout the corner property. So those come up every spring, and if they're daffodils, they're naturalizing, so they're spreading and that sort of thing. I have some bird of paradise. This is called an umbrella plant, I think. That's the one plant that I absolutely love, but it gets really out of control. So I don't know that I would ever willingly plant that again, because within about 5 years, I think I will have a yard with nothing but umbrella plant. I do love bamboo, but I would never plant it in the ground. So the only bamboo I have are in big, huge barrels, and I have a thing at the bottom. So hopefully it can't ever escape the bottom. So it's kind of a mix, drought tolerant. I have some natives now. I've been trying to incorporate more natives because I wanted to have my property on the native garden tour. but they came out and looked and said, you don't have enough natives. And I think I would need to be 80% natives to be on the tour. And I don't have even close to that. So over time, I'm trying to add more natives. So yes.
Someone has asked about how you water the plants in the walls. How do you do that?
Okay, so it's kind of hokey, I have to admit. I'm sure this could be done better, but again, I had no budget to do any of this, so I just had to kind of figure it out. And thankfully, my husband helped on this part. So what I have is basically a series of soaker hoses that go along kind of the edge of the wall right here. And then there's a series of sprinklery kind of white pipes that pop up. And then there every so often is a sprinkler that kind of in a circle. At some point, the soaker hose didn't work. So a lot of my stuff died. So then I had to kind of start to hand water. And I hate hand watering. That's, I don't want to do that every 3 days in the summer. So a lot of this just kind of looks like this, and then summer hits and it kind of doesn't look so good. And then this is the time of year I clean it all out. So it's a mix. Soaker hoses and kind of this plastic PVC tubing stuff that's connected then back to a hose bib. And so that's a good question, because at one point I had to tear up a bunch of the courtyard I'd created because I had to lay the hose down underneath it to get to this area to water it. So, again, trial and error. I don't know that there's like a checklist per se on how to do it, but worst case.
How long do your soaker hoses usually last? Do they last a long time, or?
Yeah, I mean, the problem I think is we ended up going to the sprinkler method over the soaker hose at some point because there was a problem with the soaker hose, but I don't even recall what the problem with the soaker hose is. So it's still laying there. I'm sure it still can work if we kind of troubleshot it. But, I'd say you probably get 10 years out of a soaker hose, but that's just based on my own experience. But I would like right now, I just wish we'd get some rain because then I could stop watering because it feels so wasteful. I think my sprinkler system runs maybe 5 minutes every night, and that keeps it pretty, keeps it pretty green near the sprinklers. That's for sure. The wall gets, like I said, gets a little crunchy in the summer, and it's looking pretty crunchy right now. I need to clean it out.
Could you talk a little bit about walking pathways and walking trails and how you would set those up, like how you install them? The question is like just generally, how do you build a walking trail or a walking pathway?
So depending on what you have underneath it, I would cardboard sheet mulch. I'd have some free tree mulch, the cut up kind that comes from like an arborist that you can get for free, or wood chips or something. And typically what I do is I dry lay it out on top of that, and I kind of get a sense like, do I like the way it's moving? I'm a big fan of kind of this curvy, kind of cool, spirally kind of thing. So, I live with it for a day or two and see if I like it. And then once I feel like it's what I want, then I will go through the process of basically, let's imagine we're using this brick. It could be whatever, of really kind of, making sure that this is in and that it's well supported and it's even with the other ones. And then that's the other thing. I use sand and gravel to go around things. What I've learned is sand is good for like the first layer, but gravel's better for like the top layer. And then you just kind of, you just put it in place, and if it's too low, you put some stuff under it and you make it higher. And
so are you on your hands and knees doing all this the whole time?
Well, you know what? I wish I had a thing in here. I don't have a thing in here, but IKEA makes these little benches, and I think they're for kids to get up to a sink to brush their teeth. And they're just these plastic, like they have 4 feet, and then they kind of have some nubbiness on the top so you don't fall off. I have like 6 of those, and they're all over my front and backyard. So anytime I want to work in the yard, I pretty much would sit my buns down on that and bend over and do the thing.
Cool.
Because I find that most of the time I can't sit on the ground without like hurting my back, and so that seems to be a pretty good mechanism for me. You could kneel on like a kneel pad, you could mix it up. Some things are easier to do. Working on the wall, you just stand up and do it. It's really easy. Working down on the courtyard with all the pavers and stuff, yeah, you have to bend to do that, and so that can be kind of challenging, but you get pretty strong even doing it. I mean, you do 3,500 hours of something, your body kind of gets used to it. And I had some pretty big guns, right after I had finished this project. I don't think I do anymore, but
could you talk a little bit about the patio again?
Yes.
Someone says, did you put down sand or any other material first? And but also, as I understood it, that was your lawn. So how did that work?
So imagine the layers this is just lawn, and it was sloping down. So I pretty much just took cardboard, cut it up, we just took it as it was, tape and all, and flattened it, and just put cardboard everywhere. It covered every piece of the front yard. And then
did you cut the grass short or do anything to the grass first?
nothing. Never experienced the grass again. Just said, bye grass, never going to see you again. Because the cardboard kills it. I mean, not because of the cardboard, but it doesn't get any sun. So the trick is you don't want to leave any cardboard where there's any strips where the sun can get in there, because weeds will grow and grass will grow and craziness will happen. So when you do the sheet mulch, you make sure those pieces are there's no sun anywhere. It's tight. And so I even did 2 and 3 layers of cardboard. Then on top of that, I did the tree mulch that I got from the arborist for free. And that I layered depending on what, if I had a thick brick or I had a thin brick or whatever, I would kind of fill in with tree mulch to kind of even that out. But as I said earlier, then I found out that even tree mulch biodegrades over time. So sometimes it would sink down. So then I learned, okay, I really need to use some kind of rock, sand, gravel underneath, on top of the tree mulch, basically, to have something that wasn't going to really shift too much. So again, I use whatever I have on hand. So if you have access to sand, use sand. If you have access to gravel, use gravel. If you have access to tree mulch, use tree mulch, or all 3 combined.
So all of that patio area has dead lawn underneath it.
Yeah. And the thing is, I've dug some of it up in the last year or so, and there's nothing. I mean, nothing but worms and awesome soil. Maybe some ants, there, and occasionally some tape, some Amazon tape or something that I pull out. But it's all that stuff is biodegraded. There's no more cardboard. There's just a couple pieces of like woody pieces from the tree mulch, but like anything that was leaves or anything that was like green waste that could be broken down, those worms have eaten it and done their job. So
and the lawn is gone. You can't find the lawn anymore.
Totally gone.
Cool.
Now that's not to say on occasion you'll get some weeds in the cracks, and that kind of drives me crazy, I have to be honest. And the only thing I found to work with that is I just have to get out there as soon as the weeds start popping up and pick them. I'm sure there's other things, but I'm not a big fan of like spraying stuff, and I would never use Roundup and stuff. So that's kind of an unfortunate thing. Even if you get rid of the grass, eventually weeds and grass try and come in the cracks again, not because they're growing from underneath, but birds are happening and they're pooping, and there's seeds, and nature's happening all around us. So you can't get away from it completely. But that's why I grow. Let's see if I have a shot of the Dichondra again. I don't think, I thought I might. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I'm going quick.
Do you plant vegetables at all?
I do. Actually, the place that I plant vegetables, I'm just going to pop back to a picture where I have my vegetable garden. Yes. So in this picture, these are internal, I call them internal flower beds. this is where I have a bunch of fruit trees, and this is where I plant my tomatoes. So you can't really see over here, but there's quite a bit of land. And so these two beds, they get a lot of sun. They're in a really good place, and that's where I grow vegetables. I don't do winter vegetables though. Winter is the time that I go and I work on this huge project and kind of clean it up and stuff. But I do grow.
Do you have to put any kind of barrier behind the rock when you're planting vegetables, or to keep gophers out or anything like that?
I haven't had to. We don't really have a gopher problem. I will give you a pro tip though. I wish I would have brought a visual aid up here for you to see. One of the things that I've learned, because we have a lot of fruit trees, I think on our property, I think we have close to 30 fruit trees because we love fruit. We have citrus, we have plums, we have stone fruits. I mean, everything, cherries, everything you can imagine, and pomegranates. The one thing I've learned, because between the squirrels and the fruit rats, which we have a lot of here in San Jose, they eat our fruit or our vegetables or whatever the case may be. So, you know, those plastic clamshell, you know, things that you're probably really bummed because you're like, is anybody even going to ever use this again? They have strawberries in them and you snap them down. The really big ones, not like the blueberry size, but like the strawberry one. I use those, and when my fruit starts to show, like persimmons or whatnot, I go and snap one of those over each fruit. But I leave some fruit for the critters because, you know, I don't want to starve them out or anything. You know, they deserve to live and eat. So what that means is we actually get some pomegranates that we get to eat as humans, which is great because we've had, I don't know, 30 pomegranates off our tree, which happens to be, you can't really see it, but it's right about here. And so that's just a Julie tip. That's not a Master Gardener tip, but it's a great way to reuse those containers. And the critters can't figure out how to get in there because it has that snapper mechanism that's kind of tight. So
great idea.
Yeah, that's what I do. I mean, it looks really crazy, but you have to know that my neighbors already know that I'm kind of a special treat because this is what my yard looks like. So if they see a tree of plastic clamshell strawberry containers on top of fruit, I'm sure they just go, oh, that Julie. Yeah, okay, let's keep walking. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. And thank you so much for sharing your garden with us and your Urbanite adventure with us, Julie. There aren't any more questions.
Okay.
It's been really fun listening to your talk.
Thank you so much. And I wanted to point out this one slide at the very end here is, you know, feel free to connect with me. I'm totally cool. I'm a real person. I'm normal to a point. This is a Facebook page that a friend of mine, Smita, and I run. It's called Sustainable SJ. It's simple tips for how to make your life more sustainable. I included the Facebook page for the UC Santa Clara County Master Gardeners. I also included the Sassy Succulents page, which I'm part of that group with the Master Gardeners, and also the Green Elephant page. I didn't even talk about Green Elephant, but that's a really cool other thing that I am part of for Master Gardeners. So go to that page and check it out. And then this is my Pinterest account. I have literally thousands of pictures of concrete, urbanite, front yard, you know, bricks, barrels, anything you can imagine. Everything you've seen today, mostly the inspiration has come from those pages. And then this is just my LinkedIn page in case you want to be connected on a like more casual, not casual way, whatever. I'm open to it. So thank you so much. And feel free to contact me. Facebook's probably the best way, maybe through Sustainable SJ or even LinkedIn. And I hope this helped. And I hope you have a newfound appreciation for the beauty all around you. And be safe. And thank you for your time.